like, to the group thing?
Today we are doing the text-based seminar, and our main question is, you want to say it?
How has the Tempest influenced other works in the modern world?
So basically we're just going to go around and each talk about an example of how the Tempest has affected something or someone in the modern world, and then we're going to discuss about it. So, yes.
There's
All
not really
facts,
an
no
order.
opinions. Yeah, there's not really an order in this one. Okay.
Well, I mean, you can definitely have some opinion.
Do you want to go first?
You say you're right.
Okay, I'll go first. Okay, so the first comparison is how the Tempest is similar to the novel Brave New World. Brave New World is by Aldous Huxley, and it is from London. So that just shows it's from London. Okay, anyways.
Other parts of the world.
Yeah. So that just shows how it affects other parts of the world. So basically, the main things of how it is similar to the Tempest is that it focuses on the importance of power, which is very evident in the Tempest because we see how power is important to, so important to Antonio that he decides to take over his brother's position. It talks about relationships of family and friends, which is one of the main things in this, because the very end of the play, we notice that family and friends come back together and unify in the end. And then Shakespeare is also mentioned in Brave New World, so that kind of goes 2 and 2 with how they both use Shakespearean language and references. Along with similar patterns and themes, it contains many similar characters in comparison with The Tempest. So for example, A Brave New World has a character known as Bernard Marx. He has times of anger, but he also finds sympathy for others, and he knows how to give to others and how to help others. And he is similar to Prospero in that they both express their anger towards others by acting out, but in the end they also show that they care for others and that they empathize for others. Another comparison would be how John the Savage from A Brave New World and Caliban from The Tempest are similar, because both characters were considered outsiders and they were treated in very unfair ways. So basically, overall, it is clear that Brave New World has many connections to The Tempest in that they both contain the same topics and similar backgrounds of their characters. So how do you want to talk about that?
Okay, so, well, basically what I was going to say is that many of the same, like, themes and ideas used in Shakespeare are now used, like, today, and, like today's modern literature, like, as an example that you gave. Like, for example, the first time that the world has seen love at first sight came from Shakespeare, and then also he showed characters with greed and like dictatorial characters, like she said. And so basically these certain themes that Shakespeare came up with are used through, like, because of this one like theme that he came up with and this one idea that he came up with, it is now used in many other parts of the world, and like stories are based off of his work. So, like, as I said, like, love at first sight is used, and then characters with greed, and then so basically these like certain themes that he made are like allowed for this new literature to be made, and it's still seen like today.
I agree with you, because because Shakespeare made like some of the most popular themes throughout novels, books, plays, anything, stories in general. And so I think that he made them so universal that it's easy for other authors to utilize the themes that he created.
I think it's cool that like he made it so long ago, like introduced all these themes so long ago.
Yeah,
it's so
We're
wow.
gonna have to take a pause.
Yeah.
Okay, this is resumed.
So I was saying how I think it's cool that Shakespeare came up with these themes and type of characters a really long time ago, but they're still being used today and being like built off of, and it's like the foundation of basically all of the works and creative arts that we see today. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a couple more examples.
Sorry.
So Abby, do you want to do your Forbidden Planet one?
Oh, okay. So basically, Forbidden Planet is a movie that was created in the 1900s, I think. And so basically, and you know, Shakespeare was created whenever he was born. But so basically, it was shot in Hollywood. So that shows how it's. I don't know where Shakespeare was born, but somewhere.
England.
And yeah, and his kind of stories came all the way to Hollywood. And so basically, Forbidden Planet is the same exact concept. Forbidden Planet is the same exact concept as the Tempest. So basically, Forbidden Planet has this main character called Morbius, who lives in this isolation with his daughter Altaria, just like Prospero lives in isolation with his daughter Miranda. And so Morbius uses technology to conspire over his enemies and to attack his enemies, which is similar to how Prospero uses magic to hurt his enemies. And then, wow. And so Altaria, she falls in love with this guy named John. And so, this is very similar to how Miranda falls in love with Ferdinand. So as you can see, like all these themes of like love at first sight and dictatorial characters is all seen like in these in this movie. And so basically, the idea of dictatorial characters with power represents many of the same ideas represents how Morbius and Prospero are like similar because they both have powers that help them accomplish their goal. And so like as dictatorial people are, they accomplish their goals by using their power and by using like their destruction that they have. And lastly, so the lives of like these characters in the movie and the book or the play is determined by this dictatorial power, like technology or magic. And so both of these, but the beginning, like how it's set up, and the end is very similar to one another. And like the themes within the movie and the book are very similar and they all share like similar characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see a lot of like the magic aspects of Tempest and like Caliban and the outside forces. It's seen in a lot of stuff today.
Well, yeah, I also just think like as I was saying, like I think the main one of the main things that are seen. Okay, well, it is clear that one of the main things that are seen like throughout movies now, or just like any like princess movies or anything like that, is always like love at first sight. Like Abby talks about is clear in Forbidden Planet with how Altaria falls in love with John at first sight. And just like Ferdinand and Miranda in The Tempest. And as we know, there are many movies where that happens, and I just think that really shows like how one plot of Shakespeare's play can affect so many movies, TV shows, books, stories, anything in the future, and just really shows how it has made an impact on like I don't know, the importance behind a story or messages behind a story.
Mm-hmm. It's like a snowball effect. It starts with one thing, and then it just keeps rolling and rolling, and throughout time, it develops into something much more complex.
And if you read books today, you can find these certain themes that Shakespeare uses. Like you can find at least one of his themes that he uses in that literature or in that movie, because of like all the stuff that I don't even know what I'm saying. So basically the themes and like anytime you like read a book or something, you can find one of his themes because they were so profound on the world and like
I don't really know. Okay, do yours now.
Okay. So we also, or the Tempest also, unlike their examples, it doesn't have to exactly like mirror the plots. So there can just be aspects of the Tempest found in different stories. And I said like the love affair of or relationship between Miranda and Ferdinand is almost exactly the same as the love story in Pocahontas, which is a Disney classic movie. And it's just like how the main characters, Captain John and Pocahontas, fell in love at first sight, just as Miranda and Ferdinand did, and how there were obstacles between them being together that made them appreciate their love even more. There's also led to the theme that's used a lot today, as in like you gotta, like love isn't easy, but working towards it makes you appreciate it even more, and that's a common theme throughout a lot of works today, which can be seen in The Tempest and another example in Pocahontas.
Yeah, so as you can see, basically the main research that we did showed the effects of themes in The Tempest on other novels and such, but it just really shows how the messages portrayed throughout The Tempest really flow into future literature and works. So we talk about how there's like the greedy characters, like for example, there's many greedy characters in The Tempest. We have Caliban, Stefano, Antonio. Alonzo can be greedy at some times. They can all really be greedy, and greedy characters are shown throughout so many works in the future. Also, Love at First Sight, we already spoke on that. And then revenge and violence in order to achieve forgiveness and justice. I think that's like that's a really big one also as well that are seen throughout. So yeah, there aren't many works in the modern world that have the exact plot, but it is clear that they show the same messages and ideas throughout, and it really just reflects The Tempest when you read it or watch it. You can just see relationships between them, and I think that's what makes it so amazing of how something from Shakespeare times has affected something in modern day.
And then, so yesterday I was reading how to read literature like a professor, because we have to like read those chapters or whatever. But so basically, what it was, Thomas Foster was saying that that all books or all types of literature, movies, and all this stuff come from something in the past. They're never original. They're never someone's original thought. They're always like based on another thing, even though it may be something new that people haven't seen before, but some aspect of the book or the piece of literature will be different. And so but it did have to start somewhere. Like the ideas had to start somewhere, and for me, that is seen through Shakespeare. Like these certain themes, like it had to start somewhere. So the themes that he made, the books that he created, all kind of made a way for this modern literature that we have today. Like many times we have, like he made stuff based on war, and he made stuff based on his surroundings and greed and stuff like that, which is seen through like all movies today, all works today, because
it's still relevant.
Yeah. And so like characters with greed, like that's a major one, because it's about like a character, they want something, and that like drives them to do this like certain thing. So like I don't know, he used like the surroundings of his world, and he used ideas that he created, and it made it into like all these like pieces of literature that are now seen through to like today's work.
Yeah, I think specifically in The Tempest, it is clear that it affected the modern world, because The Tempest, as we know, the plot is basically begins with a catastrophic event, but it eventually leads to everyone being split up and learning their own lessons, and then in the end coming together and helping each other and relying on each other like they didn't before. And I just think that there are so many novels, books, movies, etc. There are so many things today that show that as a plot where one person or one thing, one event affects the rest of the story. And I really think The Tempest has a big impact on stories like those, because The Tempest really does show how the storm that Prospero caused affected everyone else. They split up, they learned their own lessons, they went through rough patches, but in the end they came together, they apologized, and yeah.
Yeah, I think the lessons that are told and like taught through Shakespeare's plays, specifically The Tempest, like have turned into common morals that a lot of people like go by. So like people teach their kids and like, you know, forgiveness and coming together and family and all the importance of that. And I think not only is it like taught to people, but it's also showed in works today. So it's become kind of like a common moral throughout society because of these first works that led to more.
Yeah.
And then also, many of like Shakespeare's, like the background of characters that he creates is seen in other characters. So like the relationships, so like father and son relationship, or like daughter and father relationship, or like spouse relationships, like Ferdinand and Miranda, that was like a love connection, and then like father and daughter, Miranda and Prospero, and then Alonso and Ferdinand. So basically he is showing like he's using these like certain connections between people to create like a story, and so which is now used like today. Like many stories can be based off like mother and daughter relationships, or like stories will be based on hatred towards brothers, or other could be based on like love, which is like a main driving point of many pieces of literature, because like the thing that he created was like so powerful, I guess, so it caused like other authors saw this and they wanted to expand on it and they wanted to add more to it. So basically this work was like kind of like a foundation, and then it kept getting added on over the years, and it's the foundation. In order for it to be there, in order for a building to stand, a foundation must be there. So Shakespeare's foundation of all this relationships and stuff had to be there in order for this new modern literature to be made.
Mm-hmm. And I think he also created a symbol that stuck, which was like a lot in you see a lot in modern literature and works and movies, like the foreshadow, like weather used to foreshadow the story. So like, you know, a lot of times it'll start out with like a windy or storm or whatever, and he also, that started with him, Shakespeare, using the Tempest in the beginning of the story to foreshadow all the chaos, and you know, like the wildness of the storm represents the wildness of the play, and that's used a lot in like film and TV.
Yeah, like certain like things that you see, like you were talking about foreshadowing, like certain things that you see before, like at the beginning of a movie or at the beginning of a book, are very impactful later in the book, and he showed that. So that's like another thing that he did, like he made these certain like elements of the book to be there for a reason. Like most of, like everything in a book is basically there for a reason. So the use and the timing of certain events in plays and in books is like important, and then he made that like more relevant, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also another thing that is shown throughout many works in the modern world is just like the effects. Like we've talked about this before, like how this is one of the major messages just seen in the play, is the effects and relationships that people have with others. So like the effect one person has on another. So as I talked about in the beginning, Brave New World, there's a woman known as Lanina Crown in Brave New World, and she was similar to Miranda. She was a young, innocent girl. She just had a good relationship with everyone, and that just really shows like how those characters represent one another in their own personality. Also, how I said with John the Savage and Caliban, they were they both had unique stories and were considered outsiders, and this led to them being treated in unfair ways. So basically what I'm trying to say is that there are certain characteristics and affect how they're treated and their relationships with people, and that also just shows how similar The Tempest is to other works because, for example, like I said, Caliban was an outsider and he was treated unfairly, just as John the Savage was an outsider, had his own unique story, same with Caliban, and he was treated unfairly as well. It just shows how one story that is similar to another story can affect how they are both similar in their everyday life and how they're treated and how they come across from people and their basic relationships with people. Abby, you want to say Ariel?
Okay, so one more like story that we have like based on The Tempest is called Ariel, and so basically Ariel is exactly based off The Tempest, not written by Shakespeare now, but it's more like relevant today, I guess. And so basically the point of view of the story is from the spirit of Ariel, and so basically everything happens at the same, like Ariel is locked on like its own planet, or not planet, its own like island, and Prospero is like a mariner, and he like comes and Ariel tries to convince Prospero to like help like him, but it says her in this one.
It's him.
But this one says
It's her. I know, we already talked about this.
Yeah, but like, okay, so in this story, Ariel's a girl, and so basically Prospero wants to return to his original home with his daughter Miranda. However, Miranda falls in love with Caliban instead of Ferdinand, so it is a little bit different, but it still shows the theme of love at first sight, like instead of this time, because Ferdinand was the first man that she had like ever seen besides Prospero, but this time, and now it's Caliban, and that's the first person that she sees. And so basically
like same messages but like different characters.
Yeah, different characters. And so then Ariel creates a storm, and then it just like alters their lives. And so basically the same thing that happened in The Tempest, Ariel also created a storm which altered their lives, but except this time it's more focused on like what happens with Ariel and the outcome instead of Prospero. So basically a lot of like basically what I'm trying to say is that a lot of stories come from this, and they're based, like the foundation for the story is based off of The Tempest, just because of like all the lessons that it shared and all the themes that it had. And even though the stories had different outcomes, the ideas and topics were very similar to one another, but the backgrounds and the characters were very similar, or were the same, because he wanted to, the person who created this wanted to showcase like the themes used in The Tempest, and wanted to add depth to the book.
Show it from another character's point of view. They do that a lot now with like, what's it called? The pigs in the big battle.
The Three Little Pigs.
The Three Little Pigs. They've told that story through almost all of the characters' point of views.
I feel like all fables.
Yeah.
So I think that now today in modern literature, yes, it's based off of it, and yes, it showcases some of the same themes and ideas, but basically I think that Shakespeare's work and all like what he has done has served as like I've said earlier, like it served as a foundation and a basis for like further work to come. And so I think that everything that he has created and all that he has done allowed for these allowed for these new works to be made because of like the things that he came up with and the ideas that he shared with other people. Yeah.
Also, like the references from Shakespeare's books, like the sayings that he's made, and some of the themes have turned into like common phrases that are used, which also are used in songs sometimes, like Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, so basically,
That's it.
yeah, and
Majority of it.
Shakespeare is a foundation to all of the work we see
and
today.
he impacted the world
Yeah.
because he created these ideas which now people create emotional connections to. So like basically and then some people enjoy reading some, but like
It's just a lot of his ideas that he created that long time ago are surprisingly still relevant today.
and people still enjoy it today.
and
so like
people still like enjoy using that.
They're just
as
themes of life.
They enjoy using that in their own works to portray a more important or interesting story, because I mean Shakespeare is very talented, and so basically, as we were saying, the Tempest
was one of these works that is still seen today. So like the
Tempest
ideas
is
that
what
he
we're talking
created,
about.
the themes that he used within the Tempest is basically what served many of the books that we see today and many of the ideas that people come up with today.
And
So yeah, you can talk.
And it shows just as much as like this world has changed since he wrote the Tempest, the values and like themes and morals that he talked about in there are still just as important.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically, just to end it off, the relevance of the Tempest. So the main points Abby said, or we said, I guess, was power through dictatorial character, which
Like a
basically
dictator.
means like they try to like preside over others without thinking about their actions, without thinking before they speak, just stuff like that. So that's really evident in works today. There's characters with greed, themes of human nature, and just like wants and needs of humans, and then revenge and violence in order to receive forgiveness and justice, like we spoke about. And lastly, love at first sight, which was like the main one. So
that
in
we see
all,
today.
those are the main effects of the Tempest on the modern world, and that is it for our text-based seminar.
Yay! Thanks for watching.